This is private property, I said, my voice as calm and even as a freshly paved road. And you are trespassing. From the other side of the brand new automated barrier, Karen, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. Her face, already a testament to a life of perpetual outrage, was turning a shade of purple I hadn't seen since a bad batch of epoxy resin. You can't do this, she shrieked, the sound sharp enough to peel paint. This is a community road. You are illegally obstructing traffic. I just gave a slight smile. Actually, this is my road. And I'm not obstructing traffic. I'm regulating it. There's a difference. Now, the toll is $10 per crossing. Will that be cash or card? It all started because I wanted some peace. After my wife, Martha, passed away, the big house in the city felt less like a home and more like a museum of a life that was no longer mine. Every room held a ghost. So, I sold it and moved out to the 100-acre plot my grandfather had bought back when this whole area was just farmland and forest. The property was my inheritance, a legacy of quiet woods and rolling fields that had been in my family for 3 generations. My plan was simple: build a small, efficient house, set up a woodworking shop in the old barn, and spend the rest of my days turning beautiful pieces of timber into furniture, with only the sound of birds and my table saw for company. For 2 years, it was exactly that. It was heaven. I was a retired civil engineer, a man who'd spent 40 years wrestling with concrete, steel, and municipal bureaucracy. I understood lines, boundaries, and the unyielding logic of a surveyor's transit. My property lines were as clear to me as the nose on my face. They were etched into my mind, backed up by deeds and county plat maps that were older than most of the trees. The world outside could go mad, but within those boundaries, I was king of my own quiet country. The first sign of trouble was the sound. A persistent, grinding roar that started one spring morning, fouling the clean air. It was the sound of progress, I suppose, if you consider a subdivision of beige McMahon-Science progress. A developer had bought the adjacent 200 acres and was slapping up luxury homes for people who wanted to pretend they lived in the country without any of the actual dirt or solitude. They called it Oak Ridge Estates. It was a classic HOA community, the kind with a 300-page book of rules dictating the precise shade of taupe your mailbox could be painted. I wasn't thrilled, but it was their land. I kept to myself. I watched from my porch as the skeletons of houses rose from the red clay, a stark geometry against the soft green of the hills. Then, the road crew arrived. They were building the main access road, the grand boulevard that would lead to the pearly gates of Oak Ridge. And they were building it straight through the easternmost corner of my woods. I didn't panic. I assumed it was an honest mistake. A surveyor's error. These things happened. I grabbed my file, the one with the original deed and the certified survey map from when I inherited the property. I put on a clean shirt, walked over to the construction site, and found the foreman. He was a harried-looking man with a sunburned neck who looked at my maps like they were written in a dead language. He grunted, pointed a meaty thumb towards a temporary office trailer, and said, "Talk to her." Her was Karen. She emerged from the trailer like a queen from her carriage, if the carriage was a dusty metal box and the queen was wearing a pastel tracksuit that cost more than my first car. She was the president of the newly formed HOA, a position she clearly believed granted her powers somewhere between a feudal lord and a deity. She had sharp, bird-like features and a haircut that looked like it could be used as a weapon. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting that the answer was almost certainly no. I introduced myself calmly. I explained who I was, that I owned the adjacent property, and that her road crew appeared to be operating on my land. I laid my survey map on the hood of her monstrously large white SUV. "As you can see," I said, tracing the boundary line with my finger, "your entrance road cuts across about 400 yards of my property right here." She glanced at the map for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something I couldn't read in her eyes, before she dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "That's an old map," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The developer's plans are the official ones. This is all community property now." I held my ground. "I'm afraid that's not correct," I said, my patience still intact. "This land has never been for sale. It's been in my family for nearly a century. A developer can't just draw a line on a piece of paper and make my property his. You're trespassing." She actually laughed. A short, sharp bark that was utterly devoid of humor. "Listen, old man," she said, leaning in, her perfume an aggressive chemical assault. "We have permits for everything. The county approved our plans. This road is happening. If you have a problem, you can talk to our lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a community to build." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in a cloud of dust and arrogance. That was the first mistake. She mistook my patience for weakness. I was a man who had spent his life dealing with contentious zoning boards, belligerent contractors, and the labyrinthine hell of government regulations. I didn't lose my temper. I gathered data. I checked facts. And I always read the fine print. I went home, pulled out my professional-grade surveying equipment, my retirement gift to myself, and spent the next day remarking my property line. I drove solid steel stakes deep into the ground every 50 feet, flagging them with bright orange surveyor's tape. The line ran directly down the center of their freshly graded road. There was no ambiguity. It was as clear as a line in the sand. The next morning, I received an email. It was from the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. It was a formal notice of violation. I was being fined $500 for unauthorized installation of fencing and signage on community property. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was almost impressive. It was like a burglar sending you a bill for the window he broke. I responded with a polite, registered letter. I included a notarized copy of my deed, a high-resolution printout of the official county plat map, and a photograph of my newly placed survey stake sitting squarely in the middle of their road. I stated, in simple, legally sound terms, that they were the ones trespassing and that all construction on my property must cease immediately. I gave them 48 hours to respond before I sought a legal injunction. Karen's response was to double down. The next day, two things happened. First, the survey stakes were gone. Ripped out of the ground and tossed into the woods. Second, a new letter appeared in my mailbox, this one hand-delivered. It was a cease and desist order, written in hysterical legalese by the HOA's lawyer, accusing me of harassment and attempting to extort the community. It claimed they had a prescriptive easement, and that my actions were endangering the safety of their residents. It was a bluff, and a sloppy one at that. A prescriptive easement requires years of open, notorious, and hostile use. They had been grading the road for 2 weeks. It was legal nonsense, a scare tactic meant to make me back down. It was also a declaration of war. This was the point where a normal person might have felt intimidated. But my entire career was built on a foundation of unassailable facts. Karen was operating on bluster and belief. I was operating on geodetic survey data and property law. It wasn't a fair fight, but she was the one who picked it. I started digging. I spent hours at the county records office, poring over microfiche and dusty binders. I pulled the developer's original submissions, every permit, every variance request, every environmental impact statement. I cross-referenced their surveys with the historical county master plans. I sat in my office, surrounded by maps and documents, highlighting discrepancies, making notes, and feeling a familiar, cold excitement building in my chest. This was just a bigger, more complex engineering problem. And I was very, very good at solving problems. The harassment escalated. Karen started a campaign. She posted my name and address on the community's private Facebook page, calling me a hostile neighbor and a greedy land baron who was trying to block families from getting to their new homes. Cars started driving slowly past my house. Someone threw a bag of trash onto my driveway. A notice was posted on the community bulletin board near the entrance, which was still on my land, warning residents about the unstable individual living next door. They were trying to bully me, to wear me down, to make me the villain in their tidy little suburban drama. They didn't understand that I wasn't part of their community. I didn't care about their opinions. I had spent 2 years in near total solitude. I was quite comfortable being an island. Then came the day that changed everything. The day it stopped being about property and law, and became deeply, irrevocably personal. I was in my workshop, sanding a piece of cherry wood, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a chainsaw. It was close. Too close. I ran outside, my heart pounding in my throat. A work crew, 2 men with a heavy-duty chainsaw, were standing at the edge of the new road, right next to the old oak. It was a magnificent tree, over 200 years old, with a sprawling canopy that had shaded 5 generations of my family. It was the tree Martha had loved most. We'd had picnics under it. She had a favorite branch she'd sit on, reading a book. Before she died, she made me promise I'd never cut it down. Standing beside the crew, with her arms crossed and a smug smirk on her face, was Karen. A private security guard she'd hired stood next to her, a little rent-a-cop playing soldier. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. Karen's smirk widened. "Tree maintenance," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "This ancient old thing is a hazard. Its branches overhang the road. Our insurance requires us to remove any potential dangers to our residents. It has to come down. You are on my property." I roared. "That tree is mine. You touch one branch and I will have you arrested for destruction of property." The security guard took a step forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. The HOA has a legal right-of-way for maintenance." "Right-of-way? You don't even have a right to be here." I was screaming now, all my carefully managed calm shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't about a road anymore. This was a desecration. She was trying to cut down a piece of my history, a piece of Martha. Karen gave a little signal to the workmen. One of them pulled the starter cord on the chainsaw. The engine sputtered to life with a deafening roar. They were actually going to do it. They were going to cut down Martha's tree, right in front of me. Something inside me snapped. The patient engineer, the man of reason and documents, vanished. In his place was a cold, furious strategist. I turned without another word, sprinted back to my barn, and grabbed the biggest, heaviest logging chain I owned. I ran back to the tree, wrapped the chain around the massive trunk, and padlocked it to my own body. I stood there, my back against the rough bark, my heart hammering against my ribs, and stared them down. "You want to cut this tree," I said, my voice low and dangerously quiet, "you'll have to go through me." The chainsaw sputtered and died. The workman looked uncertainly at Karen. The security guard was talking into his radio. Karen's face was a mask of pure fury. Her plan for a quick, decisive show of force had just run into a 5'11", 180-pound human obstacle. She screamed at me, threatened me, called me insane. I didn't say another word. I just stood there, a silent guardian chained to a tree, feeling the solid strength of the oak at my back. It was the turning point. She had pushed too far. She had made it personal. And she had just unleashed a part of me she was not remotely prepared to deal with. The war was on. After a tense 30-minute standoff, Karen finally called her crew off, spitting a final threat that this wasn't over. The moment they were gone, I unchained myself, my hands shaking. The rage receded, replaced by an icy resolve. She had tried to destroy something I loved. Now, I was going to dismantle her world, piece by piece, using the tools I knew best, logic, research, and the unyielding power of the law. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, the glow of the monitor illuminating stacks of papers. I was no longer just defending my property, I was on the offensive. My investigation went into overdrive. I hired a title search company to do a full, deep-dive forensic analysis of the land deeds for the entire Oak Ridge development. I called my old friend, Frank, a retired litigator who was as sharp and nasty in a courtroom as a cornered badger. "So, this HOA queen is trying to steal your land and cut down your wife's tree," he'd growled over the phone. "Oh, we're going to have fun with this." Frank's advice was simple: document everything. So I did. I installed a series of high-definition, motion-activated surveillance cameras, the kind used for monitoring wildlife. I hid them in the trees, covering my property line, the disputed road, and the entrance to my driveway. Every car that passed, every person who stepped onto my land, would be recorded in crystal-clear 4K video with audio. While the cameras kept watch, I focused on the paperwork. Days turned into a week. I cross-referenced the developer's plans with county tax maps, historical aerial photographs, and geological surveys. A pattern began to emerge, a small but persistent discrepancy in the surveys. A slight shift, a few dozen yards here, a few dozen there. It was like a puzzle with one piece that was just slightly the wrong shape. Then, the report from the title search company came in. And there it was. The smoking gun. The key that unlocked the entire scheme. The original parcel of land purchased by the developer bordered a section of state-protected wetlands. According to the master plan, there was supposed to be a 50-yard undeveloped buffer zone between any construction and the wetlands. The developer's initial plan, which I found in the deep archives of the County Planning Commission, showed the entrance road running right up against this buffer zone. It was a tight fit, and building it there would have required expensive soil remediation and specialized drainage systems because of the high water table. But the final, approved plan, the one Karen had waved in my face, showed the road in a different position. It had been shifted 50 yards to the west. Shifted directly onto my property. The change was subtle on the map, a slight redrawing of a line. But on the ground, it meant the difference between a multi-million-dollar construction headache on swampy land and a simple, cheap grading job on my solid, stable ground. But how did they get it approved? I kept digging. And then I found the forgery. On the revised site plan submitted to the county, a small signature was required from all adjacent landowners acknowledging the new layout. There were 3 signatures. 2 were legitimate. The third, in the space designated for the owner of my parcel, was a messy, unreadable scrawl. It was dated a year before I even moved out here, back when the property was still in a trust managed by a distant, uninvolved bank. I called the bank. They had no record of ever being contacted, let alone signing off on any such plan. The signature was a fake. But it was more than that. The document had been filed with the county clerk. It had been used to secure permits and financing. This wasn't just a civil dispute over a boundary line anymore. This was fraud. It was a conspiracy between Karen and the developer to illegally shift their road onto my land to save a fortune, and they had filed fraudulent documents with the government to do it. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. I finally understood. Karen's hysterical, over-the-top aggression wasn't just the behavior of a power-tripping bully. It was the panic of a criminal desperately trying to protect her secret. She had to bully me off the land because if I ever proved it was mine, the whole house of cards would collapse. She wasn't just fighting for a road, she was fighting to stay out of prison. Frank was ecstatic when I told him. "It's beautiful," he cackled. "It's mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. The feds would love this. But let's not go there yet. A federal case takes years. This woman deserves something more poetic." And so, the plan was born. We wouldn't just sue her. We wouldn't just report her. We would construct a trap, a perfectly legal, structurally sound, and deeply humiliating trap. We would use her own arrogance and the very road she had stolen to bring her down. My engineering mind kicked into high gear, not designing a bridge or a building, but a project of pure, unadulterated poetic justice. Phase 1 was establishing undeniable, public ownership. I filed a quiet title action with the court. It's a lawsuit meant to resolve any questions about the ownership of a piece of land. I served the papers to the HOA. As expected, their lawyer responded with a motion to dismiss, calling it a frivolous and vexatious lawsuit. They were stonewalling, assuming they could bury me in legal fees. They didn't know that Frank was representing me pro bono, purely for the entertainment value. Phase 2 was implementation. While the lawyers played their games, I went to work. I formed a limited liability company, a simple one-man operation. I called it Martha's Oak Toll Road, LLC. Then, I legally deeded the 400-yard strip of land that the road was on from myself to the LLC. This was a critical step. It separated the land from me personally and turned it into a commercial asset. Then, I started building. I ordered a professional-grade automated toll gate, the kind you see in parking garages. I bought a small, prefabricated security booth. I spent a week digging a trench and laying armored electrical and data cables from my workshop out to the property line. I poured 2 massive concrete footers, one on each side of the road, right on the boundary confirmed by my survey. Everything was built to code. I even pulled a permit for an agricultural gate installation, which was technically true. The day it was all delivered on a flatbed truck was a glorious one. The HOA residents slowed down to gawk, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. Karen herself drove by 3 times, her face getting darker with each pass. She had no idea what it was, but she knew it was aimed at her. It took me 2 days to install everything. I mounted the toll gate mechanism on one concrete base and the barrier arm receiver on the other. I bolted the little guard shack to a slab next to it. I installed the cameras, not hidden this time, but mounted in plain sight on tall poles, their dark lenses aimed with menacing precision. I put up large, professionally printed signs. The first sign, placed 100 yards out, read, "Private road ahead. Prepare to stop." The second sign, 50 yards out, read, "Martha's Oak Toll Road, LLC. All vehicles subject to toll." The final sign, right at the gate, was a large, illuminated board listing the rates. Passenger car, $10. Commercial vehicle, $25. HOA President's oversized white SUV, $100. I added that last one myself. Frank said it might be legally questionable, but I insisted. It was a matter of principle. The night before the system went live, I sat on my porch, sipping a bourbon and watching the soft glow of the lights on my new toll booth. It was a beautiful piece of engineering. Solid. Uncompromising. Logical. It was a monument to my wife's memory and a testament to the fact that I was done being pushed around. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the rat to walk into it. The first sign of chaos the next morning was the sound of car horns. A long, angry symphony of them. I was already in the little booth, a fresh cup of coffee in my hand, watching the video feeds on a monitor. A line of cars was backed up from the closed barrier gate, all the way out to the main county road. Residents were getting out of their cars, confused, angry, and late for work. It was beautiful. Right on schedule, at 7:15 a.m., Karen's white behemoth of an SUV came roaring up, cutting around the line of waiting cars and screeching to a halt just inches from the red and white striped barrier arm. She laid on the horn, a long, furious blast that echoed through the woods. I switched on the external speaker. "Good morning," I said, my voice calm and cheerful. "Welcome to Martha's Oak Toll Road. The toll is $100. We accept all major credit cards." The driver's side door flew open and she stormed out. She was wearing silk pajamas and a look of absolute apoplexy. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the one my cameras were recording in glorious high definition. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, jabbing a finger at the gate. "You turn this thing off right now. Open this gate." "I'm afraid I can't do that," I said, still in my most pleasant customer service voice. "This is a private road owned and operated by a legally registered business. Access requires payment of the posted toll. This is a community road. I am the president of the Homeowners Association. You have no right." "On the contrary," I replied, "I have every right. The deed to this land is registered with the county under the name of my company. Your road is built on my company's property. Therefore, my company gets to decide who uses it and for how much. Now, about that $100 toll." Her face contorted with rage. "I am not paying you a single cent. You are insane. I'm calling the police. I'm having you arrested for extortion." She pulled out her phone and started stabbing at the screen. "Please do," I said. "I have all my paperwork right here. I'm sure they'll be very interested to see it." True to her word, she called the police. 2 county sheriff's deputies arrived about 20 minutes later, looking thoroughly unimpressed with the situation. They had to park on the side of the road and walk up, as the line of cars was still blocking everything. Karen immediately launched into a hysterical tirade, pointing at me in the booth, at the gate, and at the sky, accusing me of everything from public nuisance to terrorism. One of the deputies, a weary-looking man with a thick mustache, held up a hand to stop her. He walked over to my booth. I slid open the window. "Morning, officer," I said. "Morning, sir. Can you tell me what's going on here?" I handed him a neat file folder. "Certainly," I said. "In this folder, you will find a copy of the registered deed for this parcel of land, the articles of incorporation for my business which owns the land, my business license, and the permit for the gate installation. The Oak Ridge HOA built their road across my company's private property without permission. We are now charging a toll for its use. It's a simple commercial dispute." The deputy took the folder and spent a few minutes looking through the documents. He walked back to his partner, they conferred, and then he approached Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat. "From what I can see, his paperwork is in order. This land appears to be his private property. We can't force him to open his gate. This is a civil matter. You'll have to take it to court." The look on Karen's face was worth every penny I had spent on the equipment. It was a mixture of disbelief, fury, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear. The law, which she had always seen as a weapon for her to wield against others, was not on her side. The system she thought she controlled was telling her she was wrong. "You can't be serious," she sputtered. "He's holding an entire community hostage. He's controlling access to his own property, ma'am," the deputy said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "My advice is to pay the toll or find another way home. We're leaving now." With that, the deputies got in their car and left. Karen stood there, utterly defeated, in the middle of the road. The other residents were watching, some looking angry at me, but many of them now directing their glares at her. Her authority had been publicly challenged and had been found wanting. She had promised them a luxury community, and she couldn't even provide a working road. She stared at the gate, then at me. If looks could kill, I would have been a pile of ash. Finally, with a scream of pure frustration, she got back in her SUV, slammed it in reverse, and sped away. One by one, the other residents, grumbling and resentful, either paid the $10 toll or turned around. My LLC made its first $240 that morning. But the real profit was the look on Karen's face. That was priceless. The trap had sprung, and the first phase of my plan was a resounding success. The HOA called an emergency meeting that weekend. The atmosphere in the community clubhouse was electric, a buzzing hive of angry homeowners. Karen had framed the meeting as a call to arms, a chance to rally the troops against the enemy at the gates. I knew she would paint me as a villain, an extortionist holding them all captive. So, I decided to attend. I walked in 5 minutes after it started. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me. I was dressed simply, in clean jeans and a collared shirt, holding a single manila folder. I took a seat in the back row and listened. Karen was at the podium, in full righteous fury mode. She was weaving a grand tale of corporate bullying, of a greedy developer, conveniently not mentioning her connection to him, and a crazy old hermit trying to shake down honest, hard-working families. "And this man," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion as she pointed a finger directly at me, "this man is trying to bleed us dry. He has illegally blockaded our only entrance and is demanding outrageous sums of money. We will not stand for it. We will sue him. We will petition the county. We will fight." A smattering of applause broke out, mostly from a few people in the front row who were clearly her loyalists. But many others in the room just looked tired and anxious. They weren't interested in a war, they were interested in getting to work on time without paying $10. When her speech finished, a hand went up in the audience. "What is our legal position on this?" a man asked. "Did the HOA's lawyers not check the property lines before they built the road?" Karen's face tightened. "The developer's surveys were certified," she snapped. "This is a baseless legal trick. Our lawyers are confident we will prevail." Another hand. A woman this time. "Prevail when? In a year? 2 years? What are we supposed to do in the meantime? Pay this man every day?" The room started murmuring. The unity Karen was hoping for was fracturing. This was my moment. I stood up. "Perhaps I can clarify a few things," I said, my voice carrying easily in the suddenly quiet room. Karen's eyes narrowed. "You are not welcome here. You have no right to speak." "Actually," I said, walking slowly toward the front, "according to your own bylaws, any matter affecting the community can be discussed by an affected party. Since my property is currently your primary topic of conversation, I believe I qualify." I didn't wait for permission. I stood next to the podium, placing my folder on it. "My name is Arthur Penhaligon," I began. "My family has owned the land next to you for 97 years. I'm not a corporation. I'm not a developer. I'm the guy whose land you paved over without asking." I opened the folder. "This," I said, holding up a large, laminated copy of the county plat map, "is the official survey of this area. As you can all clearly see, the red line is my property. The yellow line is the road your HOA built. It is, without any question, on my land. I then held up a copy of my registered deed. This is my title to that land. It is clean, it is legal, and it is undisputed. I paused, letting them absorb it. I did not ask for this situation. I approached your HOA president months ago, when construction began, and I was dismissed. I sent a registered letter, and I was ignored. My survey markers were illegally removed. I was threatened with lawsuits. And your HOA president sent a work crew to illegally cut down a 200-year-old tree on my property, a tree that held deep personal value for my family. A wave of shock rippled through the room. They had only heard Karen's side of the story. The toll booth, I continued, my voice still calm and measured, is a last resort. It's a business proposition. Your community requires the use of my company's asset, our road. So, we charge a fee for that use. It's how business works. However, I said, looking out at their faces, I am not an unreasonable man. I recognize that you are homeowners, not the ones who made these decisions. So, my company is prepared to offer a solution. We will offer a monthly resident pass for a flat fee of $50 per vehicle. This gives you unlimited access and ends the daily toll. The mood in the room shifted instantly. $50 a month was steep, but it was a manageable number. It was a solution. It transformed me from a villain into a businessman they could negotiate with. Karen saw she was losing the room. This is extortion, she shrieked. He's making you pay for something that is rightfully yours. No, I said, turning to face her directly. I'm making you pay for something you stole. My words hung in the air. The accusation was direct and public. Karen's face went white, then crimson. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she seemed to have no response. She had lost control of the narrative, and she had lost control of her residents. The meeting devolved into arguments, not directed at me, but at her. People were demanding to see the HOA's legal documents, the surveys she had approved, the budget for the inevitable legal fight. Her base of support was crumbling before her eyes. I had revealed the first crack in her fortress, and now her own people were starting to tear it down from the inside. I gathered my papers, gave the room a slight nod, and walked out, leaving her to face the angry mob she had created. Karen did not take her public humiliation well. Deprived of the support of her community, she turned to a campaign of direct, vicious harassment. She was a cornered animal, and she was lashing out. The smear campaign on the community Facebook page went into overdrive. The accusations became wilder. I was no longer just a greedy hermit, I was a dangerous recluse with a history of instability. She hinted that I was a danger to the community's children. It was baseless slander, but it was ugly. Then, she escalated. My son, his wife, and my 2 young grandchildren came to visit one Saturday. We were in the backyard having a barbecue when a car from Child Protective Services pulled into my driveway. 2 grim-faced case workers got out and informed me they had received an anonymous tip alleging child endangerment at my residence. The rage that filled me was cold and absolute. She had crossed a line that I didn't even know existed. To bring my family, my grandchildren, into her petty war was unforgivable. I remained perfectly calm with the case workers. I invited them in, offered them iced tea, and let them speak to my son and his wife. They saw a loving family, a clean home, and 2 happy kids playing with Legos. They were apologetic and left within an hour, but the damage was done. My daughter-in-law was shaken, and my son was furious. Karen had tried to poison the one part of my life that was still pure and good. My surveillance cameras paid off that night. Around 2 a.m., a dark pickup truck with its license plates covered pulled up to the toll booth. 2 figures in hoodies got out with spray paint and crowbars. They went to work on the booth, smashing the window and spray painting crude slurs on the walls. They tried to pry open the automated toll machine, but it was built like a bank vault. After a few minutes of fruitless effort, they gave up and sped off. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. The high-definition night vision was flawless. While their faces were mostly obscured by the hoodies, the camera caught a clear shot of the truck's passenger. As he turned, his hood slipped back for a split second, and the infrared light perfectly illuminated his face. It was Karen's surly, unemployed nephew, a young man who I'd seen doing yard work at her house. And the truck? I ran the grainy image of the uncovered part of the bumper through an enhancement filter. A distinctive dent and a faded political sticker were clearly visible. It was a perfect match for the truck that was always parked in her driveway. This was more than harassment now. This was criminal vandalism. But I still didn't go to the police. A misdemeanor charge wouldn't be enough. I was playing a longer game. I saved the video file to a secure, encrypted hard drive. It was another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall I was building around her. Her final, most desperate move was an attempt to ruin me professionally. I still did occasional consulting work for the county's engineering department, reviewing infrastructure plans. It kept my mind sharp and the pay was good. Karen, through her HOA's lawyer, filed a formal ethics complaint against me with the county board. She accused me of using my insider position with the county to gain an unfair advantage in my property dispute. She claimed I had accessed confidential records to create my fraudulent land claim. It was a complete fabrication, but an official complaint triggered an automatic investigation. I was temporarily suspended from my consulting duties pending the review. She was trying to cut off my income and destroy my professional reputation, the one I had spent 40 years building. I sat in my office that night, staring at the suspension letter. The walls felt like they were closing in. She was attacking my family, my property, my reputation, my livelihood. She was trying to burn my entire world to the ground. But what she didn't realize was that every attack, every desperate escalation, just gave me more ammunition. She was handing me the rope, inch by inch, and I was patiently braiding it into a noose. Just when I thought I was alone in this fight, a lifeline appeared from the most unexpected quarter. I received an anonymous email. The address was a jumble of random letters and numbers. The message was short and to the point. I know what Karen did. She's a crook. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow at the diner in town at 10 a.m. Come alone. I was wary. It could be a trap. But something in the simple, direct language felt genuine. It felt like the words of someone who was fed up. I agreed. The next morning, I walked into the diner and scanned the booths. In the far corner, a man sat nursing a cup of coffee, looking nervously at the door. It was George, the HOA's treasurer. He was a quiet, mousy man, a retired accountant who always seemed to be sweating, even in winter. He was completely overshadowed and constantly bullied by Karen at the HOA meetings. I sat down across from him. He jumped, spilling his coffee. "George," I said quietly. "Thanks for meeting me." "I shouldn't be here," he whispered, wiping his hands on his pants. "If she finds out, she'll ruin me." "She's already trying to ruin me," I said. "What do you have?" He slid a thick envelope across the table. His hands were trembling. "I'm the treasurer. I see the books. I see everything." From the beginning, none of it added up. The payments to the developer's shell corporation, the consulting fees paid directly to Karen. It stank. He took a deep breath. "She made me handle the paperwork. I'm an accountant. I notice details. I saw the land transfer documents she filed with the county. I knew the surveys were off. I used to do some title work myself, years ago. I pulled the original county maps on my own time. I saw what she did. She moved the road. She forged that signature." My heart was pounding. This was it. This was confirmation from the inside. "But that's not the worst of it," George said, his voice dropping even lower. "The developer didn't just pay her to look the other way. He paid her to make it happen. It was a kickback. A huge 1-inch. He pushed the envelope closer to me. "It's all in there. Copies of the HOA's private ledger showing the payments. Copies of the wire transfer confirmations from the developer's offshore account to a private account Karen controls. And the original, unaltered survey from the developer's own files that he sent her before she had it changed." He was sloppy. He sent it to the general HOA email, and I was copied on it by mistake. It proves she knew exactly where the property line was before construction ever started. I stared at the envelope. It was the final, undeniable proof. The smoking gun wasn't just smoking, it was a roaring inferno. It contained evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. This went far beyond a simple property dispute. This was a federal case. "Why, George?" I asked. "Why are you doing this?" He looked up, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of steel in his watery eyes. "She's a bully," he said simply. "She's been bleeding this community dry since day one. And my wife has cancer. We're having trouble with the insurance. Karen tried to put a lien on my house last month because our lawn was a quarter of an inch too high. She threatened to foreclose on a man whose wife is dying." His voice broke. "I've had enough. Wreck her." I picked up the envelope. "Thank you, George," I said. "You have no idea what you've just done. I promise you, she will never bother you, or anyone else in this community, ever again." With George's bombshell evidence in hand, the nature of my project changed. It was no longer a simple revenge plot against a neighborhood tyrant. I was now in possession of proof of serious white-collar crimes. This was out of the hands of the county sheriff. Frank agreed. We spent the next 2 days compiling everything into a single, comprehensive package. We organized it like a legal brief. My original surveys and deeds went in Section 1, under Proof of Ownership. The video of Karen threatening to cut down the tree and the footage of her nephew vandalizing my toll booth went into Section 2, Harassment and Destruction of Property. The false ethics complaint she filed went into Section 3, Tortious Interference and Defamation. And finally, George's documents went into Section 4, the crown jewel, Evidence of Conspiracy, Wire Fraud, and Mail Fraud. We had bank statements, wire transfer records, the dueling surveys, and a sworn, notarized affidavit from George, who had agreed to be a formal whistleblower. We made 2 copies of the entire package. One was for the State Environmental Protection Agency, since the core of the fraud involved sidestepping regulations protecting wetlands. The other, larger package was for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I drove to the state capitol myself to deliver the first package to the EPA's Enforcement Division. I then drove to the nearest FBI field office and handed the second package to a stern-looking agent who listened to my story with unnerving calm. He took the evidence, gave me his card, and said, "Don't leave town, Mr. Penhaligon. We'll be in touch." The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. The toll booth continued to operate. Most residents had bought the monthly pass, and traffic flowed smoothly. Karen, however, refused to pay. She started parking her car at the entrance and walking the half-mile to her house, a daily pilgrimage of impotent rage. She was quiet, too quiet. I knew it was the calm before a storm. I was right. The final showdown was set for a specially convened community meeting. A petition, secretly organized by some of the residents I'd spoken with, had forced a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership. She knew her power was slipping away, and she was planning to go down swinging. The meeting was her last stand, her chance to use her lies and charisma to win back the crowd. What she didn't know was that I had been in contact with the FBI. An agent had called me the day before. He said, "We're ready to move. We'd prefer to do it discreetly, but if she's going to be at a public meeting, that works for us too. Just let us know when." I told him the time and place. The stage was set. The clubhouse was packed. The air was thick with tension. Karen was at the podium again, but this time she looked different. There was a desperate, wild look in her eyes. She launched into a rambling, paranoid speech, accusing her neighbors of betrayal, accusing me of being a master criminal who had hypnotized them all. "You're all fools," she screamed, her voice cracking. "He's the one who is lying. He's the one who forged documents. He's trying to destroy our beautiful community, and you're letting him." When she finally ran out of steam, the resident who had organized the petition stood up. "The floor is now open for discussion before the vote. Mr. Penhaligon, since you are at the center of this, would you care to respond?" All eyes turned to me. I had a projector and a laptop with me. "I would," I said, my voice resonating with a calm that felt almost supernatural. I walked to the front. "Karen is right about one thing. There has been a conspiracy. Documents have been forged. And a crime has been committed. But she has the perpetrator wrong." I plugged my laptop into the projector. The first image that flashed up on the screen behind me was the side-by-side comparison of the two surveys, the developer's original, showing the road on their own land, and the fraudulent one submitted to the county, showing it on mine. This, I said, pointing to the original, is the survey the developer sent to your HOA board before construction. And this, I pointed to the forgery, is the one your president, Karen, filed with the county after forging the landowner's signature. Gasps filled the room. Karen's face was a deathly pale. She did this, I continued, my voice like a hammer striking an anvil, to save her partner, the developer, millions of dollars in construction costs. And she was paid handsomely for it. The next image was a copy of a wire transfer receipt from the developer's offshore company to Karen's private account. The amount was for $250,000. The room erupted. People were shouting, pointing. Karen was screaming, "It's a lie. Those are fakes. He faked them all." "Are they?" I asked calmly. I clicked to the next slide. It was a high-resolution still from my surveillance camera, showing her nephew, clear as day, vandalizing my property. Then a still of her, screaming threats at me by the old oak tree. "Are these fake, Karen?" I asked. "Is the sworn testimony of your own treasurer, George, also a fake?" She was backed into a corner, her lies collapsing around her. She did the one thing a cornered narcissist always does, she confessed by way of accusation. "That developer promised me that land was worthless," she shrieked, her voice a raw, ragged thing. "He said no one would ever know. He paid me to make the problem go away. It was my money. I earned it." The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. She had just publicly confessed to the entire conspiracy. And in that perfect silence, the main doors of the clubhouse swung open. Two men in dark suits with FBI jackets walked in, followed by two uniformed sheriff's deputies. They moved with a quiet, inexorable purpose. Time seemed to slow down. Every person in the room was frozen, watching the drama unfold. The agents walked directly to the podium where Karen stood, her mouth agape, her face a mask of utter disbelief. "Karen Miller," the lead agent said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering." As the agent recited her rights and one of the deputies clicked the handcuffs around her wrists, her eyes found mine across the room. The hatred in them was pure and undiluted. As they led her past me, she lunged, the handcuffs straining. "You haven't heard the last of me," she snarled, her face inches from mine. "I'll own you. I'll own everything you have." I just looked at her, at this collapsed tyrant in her beige pantsuit, and gave her a small, sad smile. "No, Karen," I said quietly. "You won't." And then she was gone. The doors closed behind her, and the silent, shocked community was left to pick up the pieces. The aftermath was swift and decisive. With Karen gone, the entire house of cards she had built collapsed. The developer was indicted a week later, and his company went into bankruptcy. The HOA, under new leadership headed by a relieved and surprisingly competent George, was left in a state of disarray but also liberation. They approached me formally a month after the arrest. They were humble, apologetic, and businesslike. They offered to buy the strip of land the road was on for its fair market value, as appraised by an independent surveyor. They also offered a public, written apology for the harassment and damages, and a settlement to cover my legal fees and the cost of repairing the toll booth. I accepted. I had never wanted to be a toll baron. I just wanted what was right. I took the money from the sale and put it into a trust fund for my grandchildren's education. The toll booth was dismantled, the signs taken down. The road became what it should have been from the start, a quiet, unassuming entrance to a neighborhood. Karen's fate was a matter of public record. Faced with the mountain of evidence I had provided, she took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 5 years in a federal prison. She lost her house, her money, and her reputation. She was forced to pay restitution to the HOA for the funds she'd embezzled. The last I heard, she was working in the prison laundry. It was a fittingly mundane end for a woman who saw herself as a queen. I found my peace again. The woods at the edge of my property were quiet once more, the silence broken only by birdsong and the distant hum of my lathe. The new HOA board were good neighbors. They kept to themselves, and they respected the boundaries, both literal and figurative. Sometimes, people from the community would stop by to thank me. They saw me as some kind of humble hero, the quiet man who had slain the dragon. I never saw it that way. I was just a man who had been pushed too far. I reflected, often, on the nature of bullies. They seem so powerful, so invincible, but their power is an illusion built on fear and intimidation. It's a structure with no foundation. All it takes is one person who is willing to stand their ground, to check the facts, to refuse to be scared, and the whole rotten edifice comes crashing down. Karen thought she could steal a piece of my land. In the end, it was her own life that was repossessed. The spring after she was sentenced, I took a small oak sapling, grown from an acorn I'd collected from Martha's tree, and planted it on the edge of my property. I drove a small, simple wooden stake into the ground next to it. Not a surveyor's stake, but a gardener's. It wasn't marking a boundary of law, but a boundary of hope. A promise of new growth. My life returned to what I had always wanted. I built my furniture. I took long walks in the woods. I played with my grandchildren. The quiet I had sought was finally mine, deeper and more satisfying than before, because it was a peace I had been forced to fight for. And as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, I knew, with the certainty of a well-driven nail, that I was finally home.